So, you are planning to sell a product or service in Poland. You are not yet sure if this venture will succeed, and you don't want to pay a lot of taxes, nor do you want to register a company or as a sole proprietor. You have long asked to talk about unregistered activity. Unregistered in Poland, and in this video, you will learn what unregistered activity is, what the criteria are to engage in this type of activity, and what the advantages are. What are the disadvantages? And most importantly, the nuances and risks, because when I delved into this, I realized that it's not all that simple. For some of you, this will definitely be suitable, but for many of you, to be honest, it will be easier to open a sole proprietorship or a company. Let's figure out who and why. So, the activity is not registered. For those who don't know Polish yet, it translates to unregistered activity, which, by the way, we will now figure out also needs to be registered. From now on, I will refer to it as non-registered, as it's quicker. And the point is that you can test a niche without registering the activity in Poland. You can start selling your goods and services without actually setting up any business or sole proprietorship. And on one hand, it sounds cool. Oh, you don't have to bother, but let's figure out how it works and what the limitations are. You will find all the complete information about unregistered activity below the video. I left a link to businessgo.pl because there is a lot, but also many lists, niches that cannot engage in this. Please follow the link and take a closer look at your project, your product. So let's start with the criteria. Who can conduct and under what conditions can one conduct unregistered activity? First, the last 60 months. This I know is a lot and difficult to calculate. In the last 5 years, you have not engaged in any commercial activity. You did not have a sole proprietorship in Poland, nor were you listed as a beneficiary of any company in Poland. In short, you have not conducted business in Poland for the last 5 years. This is the first criterion. Second, your income from such activity cannot exceed 50% of the minimum wage in Poland. At the current moment, this amount is 1,800 zloty, which is 50% of the minimum wage in Poland for the year 2023. And it's important to pause here. Yes, so once again, your income from unregistered activity should not exceed 1,800 zloty per month. For those who don't know what income is, it's essentially all the money that comes to you, meaning the total amount clients have paid you for your product. For a service, 1,700 zloty is fine, but if they paid more than 1,800, there's a nuance, there's a problem with this, which you'll understand later. The next point, the criterion, is that your activity should not require initial licensing, concessions, or any kind of permits. For example, employment agencies, transport companies, mineral extraction, alcohol, laitier, cigarettes. And these kinds of niches and businesses do not fit under unregistered activities. Well, it's logical, first of all, permits are needed. Secondly, it's logical that a person who wants to engage in selling alcohol is unlikely to plan to sell for 1,500 zlotys. Usually, this is a large business in principle, a complete list of such niches where concessions, permits, and everything else are needed. Again, you will find it below the video via the link. And by the way, if you need help with company registration or an individual entrepreneur in Poland, in accounting, in business consultations in Poland, and you can contact us. Below the video, you will find all the necessary links. We will be happy to help you. And perhaps most of you will still need an individual entrepreneur status. So come to us, we will help you with this. We have sorted out the criteria, meaning if you haven't conducted commercial activities in the past 5 years, you can earn a maximum of 1,800 zlotys per month from activities not registered, and your field does not require any permits, concessions, or licenses. If these 3 criteria are met, then you can engage in universal activities. And here is the most important question now. What to do if I started activities that are not registered? And yet I exceeded these 1,800 zlotys per month, yes, meaning I have 1,900 zlotys. From this moment, you're already considered a commercial entity, yes, and you must register with the CEIDG within 7 days. A special registration as a sole proprietor, or open a company in Poland, or another form of ownership. So you have 7 days to start a full-fledged business. So it's a plus, yes, that you can make such a smooth transition, but the downside is that you need to monitor all this very carefully so that there are no issues or fines later on. Therefore, remember this amount of 1800 zlotys, you must not exceed it. Now let's talk about tax obligations, reporting, and documentation. What else is important to know, which is not mentioned on the internet? Because often they say that the clothing business is arrested, you can launch it, you can test it. The niche, everything is so fast, great, but, well, in fact, there are many things described directly in the law. Please listen carefully. First, you can avoid paying ZUS. This is a great advantage. Because you know that ZUS in Poland, the social insurance fund, is actually a much more costly part of taxes than CIT, the corporate income tax. Therefore, within the framework of a non-registered activity, you can avoid paying ZUS. That's a plus. Next, you will need to pay income tax according to the tax scale model, which is 12% of net profit. Online, it is written that non-registered activity is not registered and therefore not taxed, but in reality, it is taxed. Even I have mentioned several times in videos that you can start such an activity and supposedly there will be no taxes. But I was mistaken. There are taxes and taxes will need to be paid. You will simply need to pay them from the net profit that you have, if any. And further, we will discuss whether this net profit can appear or not. Precisely from the net profit, yes, that is. You will find out everything now. And that's not all. Everyone who conducts unregistered activities must submit an annual declaration, PID 36, at the end of the year, which has a separate section. I don't remember if it's number 9 or 14, which is specifically called unregistered activity. In this section, you must provide all information about your expenses, your income, and summarize your net profit. In order to, the tax office can then calculate your tax, that is, the amount of tax you need to pay. Within the framework of this activity, you must maintain a book of income and expenses for your unregistered activity. This can be a table in Excel. And where are the invoices for the expenses you made and the invoices for the income you receive from your clients? Sometimes it can just be invoices. Sometimes it's not necessary to issue such an invoice, but in general it is stated directly on the business.go.pl website that you can use Excel, where you will list your expenses. And these expenses, you will need to prove them simply by keeping the invoices for them. And you will need to record your income at the very least by entering it into the table. Here's an important point. If you don't do this, I'll read it in Polish first, then translate it into Russian. If it is not possible to determine the subject of taxation, then the amount, the tax, will be set at 22%. In short, if it is not possible to determine the subject of taxation, and you cannot prove all your expenses, then the tax amount will be 22%. Yes, the tax amount is based on turnover. In other words, roughly speaking, if you don't take invoices for expenses, the tax authority will say, I don't believe you. What is this in Excel? You wrote, so from all 1700, those 1800 zlotys that you made every month, you'll just pay 22% tax. Instead of 12% of net profit, you'll pay 22% of everything. That's why you need to collect such tables and invoices. It's essential to keep track of all this. What else is important about the table you need to maintain is that you need to have a sales number. For example, sale number 1. You need to have the sale date, seller's information, and buyer's information. If it's an individual, then the individual's details who bought something from you. If it's a legal entity, then their details as well, tax number, everything else. The name of the product or service you are selling. And the transaction amount itself, that is, for example, the transaction number 1. Let's go through the list right now. Transaction number 1, sale date is May 23rd. My details there are such, yes, Stanislav Cis, PESEL number. Buyer's details there. Marina, someone, her PESEL number there. Next, the name of the product I sold. For example, some consultation or cleaning services. And the transaction amount, for example, 300 zlotys. So this is how it should be maintained in the table itself. Now, the section on popular questions, and then the conclusion. Popular question number 1. Is it necessary to obtain a work permit? Because I recently spoke in Warsaw at an event with 100 people. And someone asked this question, whether a work permit is necessary. So I found out, and it works like this. In general, a work permit is not needed, especially if you are a citizen of Ukraine. yes, then it is even more unnecessary. Now, but if you are a citizen of another country, you will need to obtain a work permit if you are going to engage in activities not registered under any employment contract. That is, if you, for example, want to provide a consulting service to a company within activities not registered, and you, as a foreigner, still need a work permit, then such a permit will need to be obtained under an employment contract. Now, people have closed the tab and left. If within the framework of such activity you provide it in the format of an employment contract, that is, an employment contract is concluded with you, and you, as a foreigner, require such a work permit. If you do not have, for example, Ukrainian citizenship or a Poles card or something else, then a work permit will need to be obtained. At the same time, ZUS and all taxes for the individual will be paid by the employer, and ZUS will arise in this case. How it is calculated is a complete mystery. I won't even try to explain it to you now, but in short, ZUS is paid and the employer will pay it. But it's unlikely anyone will do that, because this is about entrepreneurship, so most likely you will work with them as if you were an entrepreneur on a B2B basis, yes. And in such a case, a contract or work permit is not needed by anyone. Even for those who need it in any other circumstances, in this case, it is not needed. The next popular question is how to be a matchmaker. Yes. Do you need to become a taxpayer or not, and so on. Here, everything operates according to these rules. Firstly, there is a limit of 200,000. If in a year you have a turnover of more than 200,000 zlotys, then you are essentially obliged to pay VAT. But since 1,800 zlotys multiplied by 12 months is not 200,000, we can disregard this. Next, when you need to be a VAT payer within the framework of non-registered activities, is if your activity initially requires up to 1,000 VAT. That is, whatever you are engaged in, your product or service immediately requires you to reach 100,000 in order to issue an invoice or receipt with VAT. You will find the full list of these types of activities again below the video via the link. Another case when you need to become a VAT payer is if you have sold your product for more than 20,000 zlotys in a year. If within the framework of non-registered activities you have sold your product for more than 20K, then you also need to become a payer, VAT. And what's interesting here is that you can become a VAT payer as an individual. I didn't know this either. That is, you can get such a certificate at the tax office and be a VAT payer as an individual. The other question is, why on earth would you want to get involved with this? But such an option exists. The last of the frequent questions. Who can control and fine? Who controls and for what can you be fined? First of all, unregistered activity may be subject to inspection in accordance with the VAT Act. That is, the one who monitors VAT in Poland is the tax office, and they can check you. Secondly, it's those who monitor violations of any consumer rights, ensuring that you are engaged in some legal activity, that you are not, I don't know, selling weapons, and so on. Well, probably the police, yes, so this is specifically on the police side. Next, Sanepid can inspect you, even within the scope of unregistered activities. And lastly, it's consumer and gender rights translates as consumer rights and GDPR, that is everything. As for privacy policy and protection of user data and the protection of consumer rights, so even within the scope of unregistered activities, you are still considered an entrepreneur and must comply with all consumer rights, meaning all consumer rights. This means returning goods. There must be some 14-day warranty conditions. In the event of a product malfunction or return, you are also obliged to do this, just as if you had a company or were self-employed in Poland. Okay, guys, let's summarize the pros and cons of unregistered activities, because you have very often asked to record a video about this, and now perhaps you are sitting and feeling sad, wondering what to do about it. What are the advantages? First, it's the opportunity not to pay ZUS. ZUS can sometimes be very large, and at the moment the full rate there, ZUS is 1,500, on average plus or minus 1,500 zlotys, and this opportunity allows you not to pay ZUS immediately. The second advantage is the ability to maintain simpler accounting. After all, you can manage this Excel yourself. You don't need an accountant. Well, it's just like once a year. You submit a report and everything is okay. The third advantage is that you can make simple transactions with users and clients. Yes, if it's by the sea, a client, just an ordinary person, bought a product or service from you, then you can simply sell it to them and record the information in Excel. So you are not required to have a cash register, you are not required to issue invoices, and all the rest. This also slightly simplifies the work for those who are still worried about whether they should. And in general, for those who are afraid of all these documents and are concerned about it, well, the activity is not touched maybe. Well, it's kind of cool to approach it as a transitional stage. What are the downsides? Well, first, there's an absolutely unclear and complicated story with restrictions. You can conduct activity without being touched, but if you have such and such a niche, then you can't. But if you need concessions, permits, licenses, then you can't. You can avoid paying VAT. But if your activity requires VAT, then you must register for VAT and pay it anyway. And in general, all of this, when you just sit down and read the law, you realize that, damn, this is not for an ordinary person. It's unreal for an ordinary person to figure this out. Yes, I know Polish, but even for me it was difficult. Therefore, the first downside is that this is more suitable for Poles, who can definitely sit down and read everything in Polish and are ready to deal with all this stuff. Sorry, to bother with it, yes. Because from my point of view, with the limitations that exist, yes, it's actually easier to either sell 10 products there under the table and then just open an ePay account and process it as transactions. Yes, it's really easier. Or, well, to open an ePay account or a company from the start and work properly. What other downsides are there? Well, this is definitely a logical limitation. You pay tax on the net profit, yes. So if you receive 1,800 zlotys a month and you have, say, 1,000 in expenses, that's 800 zlotys. You have a net profit and you will pay a 12% tax on those 800 zlotys, yes. But your limit is still 1,800 zlotys in total revenue, yes. So, well, what kind of money are we talking about? Well, I don't know, maybe 1,000 zlotys a month net you will be earning, and you will still need to keep a record of income and expenses. You still need to monitor all these limits, and if they are exceeded, you still need to register as a sole proprietor. Therefore, from my point of view, to summarize, if you are worried about the paperwork, if you are unsure whether this niche will work out or not, then okay, you can try with an unregistered side hustle. In all other cases, at the very least, you need to look for ways such as opening a sole proprietorship, or if you are starting a serious business right away, don't bother and don't waste time on an unregistered side hustle. Instead, seriously consider opening a company in Poland, especially if you have several partners. The most common case when people ask me about unregistered side hustles is when someone is doing handmade crafts, sitting at home creating something. For example, I have a bracelet on my wrist, some bracelets, or something else, and the person asks, I want to not pay taxes and do it. Unregistered side hustles, it turns out that if you make handmade items at home and sell them, you can't prove your expenses, so conditionally. Those 1,800 zlotys come in and you owe 12% on them. You will have to pay that. Yes, it's easier again to open NP or a certain number of transactions. Just stupidly do it in the gray area and then figure something out with it. Great video. Like, subscribe to the channel, do business in Poland, watch our other videos on the topic of opening and starting a company. Lots of useful stuff, but only for those who subscribe below. Under the video, there's a subscribe button. Thanks to everyone and goodbye.